A young black woman enters an elite bank, seeking a simple transaction, only to face humiliation from a racist banker who assumes she doesn't belong. But when her true identity is revealed in a stunning way, this will shock you. The marble floor of Sterling Trust Bank gleamed under harsh fluorescent light. Maya Thompson pushed through the glass doors, her cream blouse crisp against her brown skin. She clutched a leather portfolio to her chest. The air smelled of expensive cologne and old money. Richard Caldwell looked up from his mahogany desk. His smile froze when he saw her. The warmth drained from his face like water circling a drain. He straightened his cobalt blue tie with deliberate slowness. "May I help you?" His tone suggested the opposite. Maya approached the desk. "I have an appointment." "Maya Thompson. I'm here to open a business account." Richard's eyes swept over her. He didn't reach for his computer. He didn't check his calendar. He simply leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "I'm not sure you understand our minimum requirements." The words hung in the air like smoke. Other clients glanced over. A woman in pearls looked away quickly. An older man in a charcoal suit smirked into his newspaper. Maya's pulse quickened. "I have all the documentation. My business plan, financial projections, tax returns." "Miss Thompson," Richard cut her off with a raised hand. "Sterling Trust serves a very specific clientele. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a community bank." The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Maya felt every eye on her. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice stayed level. "I'd like to speak with your manager, please." Richard Caldwell laughed. It was a sound without joy, sharp and dismissive. He reached for his phone, his finger hovering over a button. "Security. We have a situation at desk 7. 3 hours earlier, Maya had stood in her studio apartment across town. Sunlight streamed through the single window, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny stars. She'd pressed her cream blouse with careful attention, smoothing every wrinkle. This was her moment. The apartment walls displayed her journey. Her Howard University diploma hung beside a photograph of her father. James Thompson smiled from the frame, his eyes warm with pride. He'd been gone 3 years, but his presence filled every corner of her life. On her desk sat her laptop, screen glowing with code. 3 years of work lived in those lines. An app called EquiAccess, designed to connect underserved communities with resources they needed. Health clinics, legal aid, financial literacy programs, everything her neighborhood lacked when she was growing up. Maya had bootstrapped the entire operation. Late nights coding after her day job, weekends pitching to skeptical investors. She'd finally secured enough funding to launch. But she needed a business account, a legitimate banking relationship. Sterling Trust Bank had the reputation she needed. She'd researched Richard Caldwell specifically, senior account manager, 20 years with the bank. His LinkedIn profile showed him at charity galas, shaking hands with city council members. He looked professional, trustworthy. Maya checked her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Natural hair pulled into a neat bun. Minimal makeup, professional but approachable. She wanted them to see her competence, her preparation. She wanted them to take her seriously. Her phone buzzed, a text from her best friend, Jasmine. "You've got this. Your dad would be so proud." Maya smiled. She picked up her portfolio, heavy with documentation. Bank statements showing her savings, business projections reviewed by an accountant, letters of recommendation from clients who'd beta-tested her app. Everything was perfect. She locked her apartment door and headed to the subway. The morning felt electric with possibility. In her mind, she rehearsed her pitch, confident but not arrogant, prepared but flexible. She'd read books on negotiation, watched YouTube videos about banking relationships. Sterling Trust Bank was in the financial district. Glass towers reached toward a cloudless sky. Maya emerged from the subway into a different world. Designer suits moved past her like schools of expensive fish. She didn't belong here yet. But she would. The bank's exterior was all marble and brass. Intimidating by design, Maya took a deep breath and walked forward. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "You're just as worthy as anyone walking through those doors." She believed him. She had to. The security guard arrived within minutes. He was a young black man, probably mid-20s. His eyes met Maya's with something like apology. Richard Caldwell stood now, his full height meant to intimidate. "There's no need for security." Maya kept her voice steady. "I have an appointment. I have documentation." She placed her portfolio on his desk. Richard didn't touch it. He looked at it like she'd set down something contaminated. "Miss Thompson, I've been in banking for 20 years. I know when someone is wasting my time." His voice carried across the lobby. Other bankers paused their conversations. "People like you come in here with unrealistic expectations. You don't understand how wealth management works." The phrase "people like you" landed like a slap. Maya felt heat rising in her chest. The security guard shifted uncomfortably. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a threat. "What do you mean, people like me?" Maya's voice rose slightly. She couldn't help it. Richard smiled. It was the smile of someone who'd never faced consequences. "I mean people without the proper background, without the financial foundation. This isn't personal, it's just business. You haven't looked at my application." Maya's hands were shaking now. "You haven't asked about my business. You haven't. I don't need to." Richard picked up her portfolio and handed it back to her. "Sterling Trust has standards. We serve clients with established wealth, multi-generational relationships. You understand." A woman at a nearby desk, younger, wearing a lavender blouse, looked uncomfortable. She opened her mouth like she might say something. Then she looked at Richard and closed it again. Maya took her portfolio back. The leather felt heavy in her hands. "This is discrimination." Richard's smile widened. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? Any witnesses who heard me say anything improper?" He knew exactly what he was doing. Every word carefully chosen. Nothing explicitly illegal, but the message crystal clear. The security guard touched Maya's elbow gently. "Mom, I think it's time to go." Maya looked around the lobby. A dozen people had witnessed this. Not one made eye contact. They returned to their phones, their paperwork, their comfortable lives. The older man with the newspaper was definitely smirking now. "I want your manager's name," Maya said. Her voice was steel. Richard pulled out a business card. He wrote a number on the back with slow, deliberate strokes. "Here's our complaint line. They'll tell you exactly what I told you." He handed it to her. "Have a blessed day, Miss Thompson." The dismissal was complete. The security guard guided her toward the exit. His hand on her elbow was gentle but firm. Maya walked through the lobby on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Behind her she heard Richard's voice, cheerful now. "Next client, please. Sorry for the delay, folks." The glass doors closed behind her with a soft whoosh. Maya stood on the sidewalk, portfolio clutched to her chest. People streamed past her, busy with their important lives. No one noticed a young woman fighting tears on a Tuesday morning. She walked to her car 3 blocks away. Her hands shook so badly she dropped her keys twice before unlocking the door. Maya sat in her 10-year-old Honda Civic. The steering wheel was hot under her palms. Outside, the financial district bustled with lunch crowds. Inside, she couldn't move. The humiliation replayed in her mind like a video on loop. Richard's voice, "People like you." The way he'd handed back her portfolio without opening it. The woman in the lavender blouse, who'd almost spoken up but didn't. The smirking man with his newspaper. She'd prepared for questions about her business model, for requests for additional documentation, for negotiation about account terms. She hadn't prepared for this, for being dismissed before she'd even begun. Maya's phone sat in her hand, heavy and full of possibility. She could call Jasmine. She could go home and cry into her pillow. She could pretend this never happened. Move on. Try another bank. Her father's voice cut through the fog of shock. She remembered him at the kitchen table when she was 12. He'd just lost a case, a discrimination lawsuit against a local employer. The evidence was clear, but the jury sided with power anyway. "Maya," he'd said, his eyes tired but fierce, "they count on you giving up. That's their greatest weapon. Not the law, not money. Your exhaustion. Your belief that nothing will change." He taught her something else too. Document everything. Every conversation, every interaction, every slight. Because memory fades, but evidence endures. Maya looked up at Sterling Trust Bank's gleaming facade. The brass letters caught the sunlight, reflecting wealth and privilege. Behind those windows, Richard Caldwell was probably already forgetting her name. Another rejected applicant. Another successful gatekeeping. But Maya wasn't forgetting. The rage in her chest was transforming into something sharper, colder, something useful. She opened her phone's voice memo app. She'd started recording the moment Richard's tone changed. Her father's training had been instinctive. The entire conversation was captured. His words, his tone, everything. Maya played it back. Richard's voice came through clearly. "People like you don't understand how wealth management works." She saved the file. Backed it up to 3 different cloud services. Then she opened her notes app and began typing. Every detail she could remember. The time, the witnesses, the woman in lavender who almost spoke, the smirking man, the apologetic security guard. Her hands stopped shaking. Her breathing steadied. The fog lifted, replaced by crystalline clarity. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. Maya drove home on autopilot. Her mind was elsewhere, pulled back to another time. She was 17, sitting in her father's law office after school. He'd been preparing for a housing discrimination case. Papers covered every surface. "Come here, baby girl." James Thompson had waved her over to his desk. "Let me show you something." He'd spread out documents like a detective in a crime thriller. Bank statements, email transcripts, recorded phone calls. "See this pattern? 3 families, all black, all rejected for rentals in the same building. Same credit scores as white applicants who were approved. Same income levels. Can't they just lie?" Maya had asked. "Say it was something else?" Her father smiled. "They always do. That's why we document everything. 1 instance? They call it a misunderstanding. 2? Coincidence. But 3, 4, 5? That's a pattern. Patterns don't lie. He'd won that case. The landlord paid damages and changed policies." Maya remembered her father's face in the courtroom. Not triumphant, just tired and satisfied. Like he'd completed necessary work. "This is what I do," he'd told her on the drive home. "I make them see what they'd rather ignore. I force the system to acknowledge its own ugliness." 3 years later, he was gone. A heart attack at 52. Too young, the doctors said. Too much stress, his friends whispered. Maya knew the truth. Her father had carried the weight of other people's pain until his body gave out. His funeral filled 3 churches. Former clients spoke about how he'd changed their lives, how he'd fought for them when no one else would. Maya stood beside his casket, numb with grief, and made a silent promise. She'd continue his work. Maybe not in courtrooms, but in her own way. Equi-access was her answer. Technology could democratize access to resources. An app didn't discriminate. It didn't see skin color or zip codes. It just connected people with what they needed. Legal aid, health clinics, financial literacy programs, all the things that would have helped her community when she was growing up. She'd named the company after her father's favorite phrase, "Equal access isn't charity. It's justice." Now, sitting in her apartment, Maya looked at his photograph on her desk. James Thompson stared back at her with those warm, knowing eyes. She could almost hear his voice. "So what are you going to do about it?" The answer came quickly. She'd do what he taught her. She'd document. She'd build a case. She'd find the pattern. Maya opened her laptop and created a new folder, Sterling Trust Bank. Inside, she saved the audio recording. Then she began researching. Richard Caldwell's history, Sterling Trust's policies, banking discrimination lawsuits in the city. The rabbit hole went deep. 3 hours passed in what felt like minutes. By evening, she had 20 pages of notes. And she'd found something interesting. Sterling Trust had settled 2 discrimination complaints in the past 5 years. The cases were sealed, buried under legal jargon and non-disclosure agreements. But patterns didn't lie. Her father had taught her that. If there were 2 settled cases, there were probably dozens of unreported incidents. People who'd been humiliated like her and simply walked away. People who didn't know how to fight back. People who didn't have a civil rights attorney for a father. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine. "How'd it go?" She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed, "Story time." "Come over." Jasmine arrived with wine and Chinese takeout. Maya told her everything. Her best friend listened, her expression shifting from concern to rage to something harder. "You recorded it?" Jasmine's eyes widened. "Girl, that's genius. My dad's training." Maya pulled up the audio file. "Want to hear it?" They listened together. Richard Caldwell's voice filled the apartment, dripping with condescension. Jasmine's hands clenched into fists. When it ended, she looked at Maya with fierce determination. "What do we do?" Maya smiled. Her father's daughter, through and through. "We find everyone else he's done this to. We build a case. We make them see the pattern." The next morning, Maya contacted the city's banking regulatory office. The woman on the phone was sympathetic but unhelpful. "So you can file a complaint, but investigations take months. Sometimes years," Maya filed anyway. Then she took a different approach. She posted in local entrepreneurship groups on social media. Her message was carefully worded. "Has anyone had difficulty opening business accounts at Sterling Trust Bank? Looking for shared experiences." The responses came quickly. Too quickly. A woman named Patricia. "They rejected my bakery account last year." Never gave a real reason. A man named David. "Felt like they decided I wasn't worth their time before I even sat down." Another woman. Keisha. "The banker made me feel like I was asking for a favor instead of offering them my business." Maya's heart raced. She reached out privately to each person. Did they remember the banker's name? Did they have documentation? Would they be willing to talk? 12 people responded. 8 had dealt with Richard Caldwell specifically. 4 had filed complaints that went nowhere. 1 had recorded part of her interaction. Maya created a shared document. She compiled every story, every detail, every pattern. The picture became clearer with each entry. Sterling Trust Bank had a problem. Richard Caldwell was a symptom, but the disease ran deeper. She discovered something else through her research. Sterling Trust was up for a federal audit next quarter. They needed clean records. Any discrimination complaints would trigger scrutiny. The bank had been paying settlements to keep things quiet, but what if the complaints couldn't be kept quiet? What if enough people spoke up at once? Maya thought about her father's cases. He'd often used media attention to pressure defendants. Public shame accomplished what legal threats sometimes couldn't. She knew a journalist from college, Tyrone, who now worked for the city's alternative weekly. He'd covered discrimination cases before she called him. "Ty, I've got a story for you about Sterling Trust Bank and their senior account manager, who's been rejecting minority business owners for years." Tyrone listened to her audio recording. He read through the compiled testimonies. When he finished, his voice was tight with controlled anger. "This is solid, Maya, really solid, but I need to verify everything. Can your sources go on record? Some will. Others are afraid of retaliation. Anonymous sources are fine for background, but I need at least 3 people willing to attach their names." He paused. "Including you." Maya thought about what that meant. Her name in print, her story public. Sterling Trust's lawyers would come after her. They'd try to discredit her, intimidate her, make her life difficult. She thought about her father in that courtroom, tired but satisfied. "Doing necessary work. I'm in," she said. "I'll get you those sources." That night, Maya called Patricia, David, and Keisha. She explained what going public meant, the risks, the potential backlash. Each person was quiet for a long moment before answering. Patricia went first. My bakery almost failed because I couldn't get proper funding. If this helps someone else, I'll do it. David was next. I'm tired of being invisible. Put my name in print. Keisha's voice was steady. I've got 3 daughters. I want them to see their mother fight back. Maya's eyes burned with tears she wouldn't let fall. Thank you, she whispered. All of you. Thank you. The article would publish next week. Tyrone needed time to verify facts and contact Sterling Trust for comment. Maya knew what would come next. The bank's denial. Their lawyers' threats. The attempt to bury the story before it gained traction. But her father had taught her about patterns. And patterns once visible couldn't be unseen. She looked at his photograph on her desk. The late evening light made the frame glow like something holy. I hope I'm doing this right, Dad. The photograph didn't answer, but Maya felt his presence anyway, proud and fierce and absolutely certain. She returned to her laptop and kept working. The article dropped on Wednesday morning. Tyrone's headline was perfect. Sterling Trust Bank, a pattern of discrimination. Maya's phone exploded with messages, supportive texts from friends, angry emails from strangers who called her a troublemaker, 3 voicemails from Sterling Trust's legal department demanding she call back immediately. She didn't call back. Instead, she waited. By afternoon, the story had spread. Local news picked it up. Social media erupted with people sharing their own Sterling Trust experiences. The hashtag Sterling Trust Truth trended in the city. Maya watched it unfold with cautious hope. Then came the bank's response. A carefully worded statement released to all major outlets. Sterling Trust Bank is committed to serving all members of our community with respect and professionalism. We take these allegations seriously and are conducting an internal review. However, we believe these claims lack merit and reflect a fundamental misunderstanding of our account approval process. The statement continued, artfully dodging responsibility while casting doubt on Maya's credibility. They didn't mention Richard Caldwell by name. They didn't acknowledge the pattern. They simply denied and deflected. Maya's hope dimmed. This was the playbook she'd expected. Deny, investigate internally, quietly settle. Make the problem disappear. Her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. Hello? Miss Thompson? This is Marcus Webb. I'm an attorney with Sterling Trust Bank. Maya's stomach tightened. Here it came. We'd like to resolve this matter quickly and quietly, Marcus continued. His voice was smooth, practiced. We're prepared to offer you $50,000 in exchange for retracting your statements and signing a non-disclosure agreement. $50,000. More than she'd ever had in her savings account. Enough to fully fund Equiaccess's launch. Enough to change her life. And Richard Caldwell. Maya asked, what happens to him? That's an internal personnel matter. I can't discuss it. But I can assure you we're taking appropriate action, which meant nothing would happen. He'd get a private reprimand and continue as before. The pattern would persist. I need to think about it, Maya said. Of course. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires. And Miss Thompson? His tone shifted harder now. If you continue pursuing this publicly, we'll have no choice but to defend ourselves vigorously. That could include a defamation lawsuit. I'm sure you understand. The threat was clear. Take the money and disappear, or face legal consequences that could bankrupt her. Maya ended the call. Her hands were shaking again. She looked around her small apartment, at her father's photograph, at her laptop with Equiaccess's code still open, at the life she'd built through sheer determination. $50,000 would solve so many problems, but it would also mean silence. It would mean letting Richard Caldwell continue. It would mean the next young black woman who walked into Sterling Trust Bank would face the same humiliation. Before she could overthink it, Maya called Tyrone. They offered me money to go away. How much? $50,000, Tyrone whistled. That's not nothing. What are you thinking? I'm thinking my father spent his whole life fighting these battles. He never took a settlement that didn't include real change. Maya's voice strengthened. I want their personnel records. I want Richard Caldwell terminated. I want bank-wide anti-discrimination training. And I want it on the record. They'll never agree to that. Then we keep fighting. Tyrone was quiet for a moment. You know they'll come after you, right? Legal bills, reputation damage, stress. This isn't a small thing. Maya looked at her father's photograph. James Thompson stared back with those warm, knowing eyes. She could almost hear his voice. They count on your exhaustion. I know, she said. Do it. The next morning, Tyrone published a follow-up article. It detailed Sterling Trust's settlement offer and Maya's refusal. It quoted her directly. This isn't about money. It's about accountability. The story went viral. National news outlets picked it up. Maya's Twitter followers jumped from 300 to 30,000 overnight. Messages of support poured in. So did messages of hate. For 48 hours, Maya felt like she was riding a wave. Maybe this would work. Maybe public pressure would force real change. Then everything fell apart. Friday afternoon. Maya was at her day job when her phone rang. It was Patricia, one of her key sources. Her voice was shaking. Maya, I'm so sorry. I can't do this anymore. What? Patricia, what happened? Sterling Trust's lawyers contacted me. They're threatening to audit my bakery. They said they'll find violations, shut me down. I have employees depending on me. I can't, her voice broke. I'm retracting my statement. Maya felt the floor tilt beneath her. They can't do that. That's retaliation. It's illegal. Maybe, but it'll take years to prove. Years I don't have. I'm sorry, Maya, I really am. The call ended. Before Maya could process it, Tyrone called. We have a problem. David just pulled out too. Said he was mistaken about his experience. That it was all a misunderstanding. They got to him, obviously. And there's more. Keisha is under pressure from her employer. Apparently Sterling Trust handles their company's payroll. Her boss told her to stay quiet or face consequences. 3 sources, all gone within hours. The pattern of intimidation was clear, but proving it was another matter. Maya's next call was from a junior attorney at Sterling Trust, not Marcus Webb, but someone younger. A woman with a hesitant voice. Miss Thompson? My name is Lauren Michaels. I work in Sterling Trust's legal department. She spoke quickly, nervously. I shouldn't be calling you, but I saw what happened with Richard Caldwell. I've seen it before. I tried to raise concerns internally, but she paused. I'm willing to testify, to confirm the pattern, but I need protection. If they find out I talked to you, I'll lose my job. Hope surged through Maya's chest. Yes, absolutely, I'll find you protection. Wait, Lauren interrupted. I need a few days to copy documents. Personnel records, complaint logs, everything. Can you give me until Monday? Of course. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much. The call ended. Maya allowed herself a moment of relief. This changed everything. An insider willing to testify. Documentary evidence. The case would be ironclad. She called Tyrone with the news. He was cautiously optimistic. If she delivers those documents, this is a whole different ballgame. Sterling Trust won't be able to settle their way out. The weekend crawled by. Maya barely slept. She kept her phone charged and close, waiting for Lauren's call. Every notification made her heart jump. Monday morning arrived. No call. Monday afternoon. Still nothing. By evening, Maya's stomach was twisted in knots. She called Lauren's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Finally, at 8 p.m., a text came through from an unknown number. This is Lauren's sister. She asked me to tell you she can't help. She's been transferred to a different department and signed a new NDA. I'm sorry. Maya stared at the message. Her hands went numb. Lauren was gone. The documents were gone. Her insider source vanished. Another text followed. She wanted you to know she tried. But they're watching everything. She has student loans. She can't risk her career. Maya sat on her apartment floor, phone in hand. Around her, the walls seemed to close in. Her father's photograph watched from the desk. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to one woman's fight. She pulled up the audio recording from that day at Sterling Trust Bank. Richard Caldwell's voice filled her apartment. "People like you don't understand how wealth management works." But now she had no witnesses, no insider testimony, no documentary evidence beyond her own recording, which a good lawyer could argue was taken out of context. Maya thought about her father's last case, the one he'd lost, how he'd sat at the kitchen table, exhausted but not defeated. Sometimes, he'd told her, "You lose the battle, but you've still moved the line. You've made them show their hand." Her phone buzzed again. An email from Marcus Webb. "Miss Thompson, our settlement offer has expired. We'll be moving forward with legal action. You'll be served papers within the week. We recommend you retain counsel." Maya looked at her bank account. She had $3,000 in savings. Not nearly enough for the lawyers she'd need. The apartment felt very quiet, very small, very far from the gleaming marble lobby of Sterling Trust Bank, where this all began. She thought about giving up, about walking away, about accepting that some fights can't be won. Then she looked at her father's photograph one more time. James Thompson, civil rights attorney, fighter, believer in justice even when justice seemed impossible. Maya picked up her phone. She had one more call to make. Maya stood in her apartment as evening bled into night. The lawsuit papers had arrived that morning. Sterling Trust Bank vs. Maya Thompson. Defamation. They were seeking $200,000 in damages. Her phone sat silent on the counter. Jasmine had stopped calling after Maya kept saying she was fine. Her investors for Equiaccess had pulled out. Too much controversy, they said. Her day job felt suffocating, co-workers whispering when she passed. The isolation was a physical thing. It pressed against her chest, making breathing difficult. She'd fought so hard, and for what? Richard Caldwell was still at his desk. Sterling Trust Bank was still operating. And she was about to lose everything. Maya walked to her father's briefcase. It sat in her closet, untouched since his death. Brown leather, worn at the corners. She'd avoided it for 3 years, afraid of the grief it would unleash. Now she pulled it out. The leather was cool under her fingers. She unlatched the brass locks. They clicked open like a secret being revealed. Inside, legal pads covered in his handwriting. Case files organized with colored tabs. A photograph of Maya at her high school graduation. And an envelope with her name written across it in his distinctive script. Maya's hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was dated 2 weeks before his heart attack, before he knew he was running out of time. "My dearest Maya," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're probably in the middle of something hard. You inherited my stubbornness, my sense of justice, my inability to walk away from a fight. I'm sorry for that. It's not an easy way to live." Tears blurred her vision. She kept reading. "But here's what I learned in 30 years of fighting. The system counts on your exhaustion, on your isolation, on your belief that you're alone. That's how they win, not through strength but through our surrender. Don't give them that victory, baby girl. Don't let them make you smaller." The letter continued with names. Contacts from his civil rights work, attorneys, activists, organizations. These people fight battles like yours every day. They'll help you. You're not alone. Maya folded the letter carefully. Something had shifted inside her chest. The pressure eased slightly. She wasn't her father, but she was his daughter. His legacy lived in her stubbornness, her refusal to accept injustice quietly. She picked up her phone and began making calls. The first name on her father's list was Eleanor Chen. She ran a civil rights organization dedicated to financial discrimination cases. Maya called, expecting voicemail. Eleanor answered on the second ring. James Thompson's daughter. Eleanor's voice was warm. "Your father was a giant. I'm so sorry for your loss." Maya explained everything. The bank, the recording, the witnesses who'd recanted, the lawsuit. She spoke quickly, afraid Eleanor would interrupt and say there was nothing to be done. Instead, Eleanor listened. When Maya finished, there was a pause. Then, "Can you come to my office tomorrow? Bring everything you have." The next morning, Maya sat across from Eleanor in a cramped office filled with case files. Eleanor was in her 60s, grey hair pulled back severely, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She reviewed Maya's documentation with the focus of a surgeon. "This is good," Eleanor said finally. "Better than good. This recording is gold. And the pattern of witness intimidation. That's actionable. But I can't afford lawyers. Sterling Trust has unlimited resources." Eleanor smiled. "We work pro bono. That's what we do. And we've been waiting for a case like this against Sterling Trust. They've been settling complaints for years, keeping everything quiet. You've made noise. You've got public attention. That changes the game." She pulled out a file. "We've been tracking Sterling Trust for 18 months. We have data showing racial disparities in their loan approvals. We have testimony from former employees about discriminatory practices. What we needed was a plaintiff willing to go public, someone with credibility and courage." Maya felt something unfamiliar, hope, but steadier this time, grounded in reality rather than wishful thinking. "Your father taught you well," Eleanor continued. "You documented everything. You built a public record before they could bury it. Now we build the legal case." Over the next week, Eleanor's team moved with precision. They filed a formal complaint with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. They contacted the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. They prepared a countersuit against Sterling Trust for intimidation and retaliation. Maya discovered something else through Eleanor's network. She wasn't the only one. Fighting Sterling Trust. A class action lawsuit was forming. 15 plaintiffs, all with similar stories. All rejected or humiliated by the bank. Eleanor was coordinating the effort. "Would you be willing to be the lead plaintiff?" Eleanor asked. "Your case is the strongest. Your recording, your public profile, your father's legacy. It all matters." Maya thought about what that meant. More scrutiny, more pressure. Her name forever attached to this fight. She thought about her father in courtrooms, carrying other people's pain because someone had to. "Yes," she said. "I'll do it," Eleanor nodded. "Then let's make them see what they'd rather ignore." Maya recognized the phrase immediately. Her father's words passed down like an inheritance. That night, Maya opened her laptop and resumed work on Equi-Access. She'd lost her initial investors, but the app was too important to abandon. She'd launch it herself if necessary. Bootstrap it like she'd done before. An email notification appeared. Subject line, "I want to help." The sender was Patricia. Her message was brief. "I recanted because they threatened my business. But I can't live with myself. I'm ready to testify again. Whatever happens, happens. My daughters are watching. I want them to see me fight." Maya's eyes filled with tears. She replied immediately, "Thank you. We're going to win this." More emails followed. David, Keisha. Others who'd been silent now ready to speak. The intimidation had backfired. Instead of scaring people into submission, Sterling Trust had revealed their desperation. Eleanor called late that night. "The Department of Justice is interested. They're opening a preliminary investigation into Sterling Trust's practices." "This is big, Maya, really big." Maya looked at her father's photograph. The late-night streetlight cast shadows across his face, but his eyes still held that warmth, that certainty. "We're going to court," Eleanor said, "and we're going to make them answer for everything." The hearing took place on a grey November morning. Federal Courthouse downtown. Maya wore a cobalt blue blazer, her father's favorite color. Eleanor sat beside her, calm and prepared. Behind them, the 15 plaintiffs from the class action suit filled the gallery. Across the aisle, Sterling Trust's legal team looked like an army. 6 attorneys in expensive suits. Marcus Webb sat among them, his expression neutral. And Richard Caldwell, wearing a charcoal suit and a practiced look of wounded innocence. The judge, a black woman named Honorable Patricia Williams, entered. Everyone stood. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Everything came down to this moment. Eleanor presented first. She laid out the pattern methodically. Statistical analysis showing Sterling Trust rejected minority applicants at 3 times the rate of white applicants with identical qualifications. Testimony from former employees about unofficial policies to maintain the bank's reputation. Documentation of settled complaints buried under NDAs. Then came the audio recording. Maya's voice filled the courtroom. "I have an appointment." Maya Thompson. "I'm here to open a business account." Richard's response. "I'm not sure you understand our minimum requirements." The exchange played in full. His dismissiveness. His phrase, "people like you." The way he'd called security without reviewing her application. 3 minutes that captured everything. The courtroom was silent. Judge Williams leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Sterling Trust's attorneys shifted in their seats. Marcus Webb stood to respond. "Your Honor, this recording lacks context. Mr. Caldwell was simply following bank policy. Sterling Trust has the right to determine which clients meet their standards." "Stop!" Judge Williams raised her hand. "I've reviewed the bank's stated policies. Nowhere do they authorize rejection without application review. Nowhere do they justify the language used in this recording." Marcus tried again. Miss Thompson came in unprepared. She didn't meet basic requirements. Eleanor stood. "May I present Miss Thompson's application materials?" She handed a folder to the bailiff. "Credit score 780. Business plan comprehensive and professionally reviewed. 3 years of clean tax returns. $60,000 in initial capital." Every requirement exceeded. The judge examined the documents. Her jaw tightened. "Mr. Webb, your client rejected this application without reviewing these materials. Mr. Caldwell made a judgment call based on his experience. His experience discriminating?" The judge's voice was sharp. "That's what the evidence suggests." Patricia took the stand next. She described her experience with Richard Caldwell. How he'd rejected her bakery account. How Sterling Trust's lawyers had threatened to destroy her business if she testified. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop talking. David followed. Then Keisha. Then 5 more plaintiffs. Each story built on the last. A pattern so clear it couldn't be denied. Richard Caldwell took the stand. Marcus Webb led him through carefully prepared answers. He claimed he'd followed procedure, that he had legitimate reasons for each rejection, that the accusations were baseless. Then Eleanor cross-examined. "Mr. Caldwell, in Miss Thompson's audio recording, you said people like you don't understand wealth management. What did you mean by people like you?" Richard's face reddened. "I meant inexperienced entrepreneurs." Miss Thompson had 3 years of business experience and $60,000 in capital. What was inexperienced about her application? She didn't present herself professionally. She wore business attire and brought comprehensive documentation. What specifically was unprofessional? Richard faltered. It was just a feeling. An instinct developed over 20 years. An instinct that rejected minority applicants at 3 times the rate of white applicants. Eleanor's voice was surgical. "That's quite an instinct, Mr. Caldwell." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Williams gavelled for silence. Eleanor pressed forward. "You called security before reviewing Miss Thompson's application. Why?" She was becoming agitated. "The recording shows she was calm and professional. She only became upset after you dismissed her. Before that, what justified calling security?" Richard had no answer. His silence filled the courtroom like smoke. Eleanor returned to her seat. The evidence spoke for itself. Pattern, practice, proof. Judge Williams called for a brief recess. When she returned, her expression was stone. "I've heard enough," she said. "This court finds clear evidence of discriminatory practices at Sterling Trust Bank. The pattern is undeniable. The testimony is credible. And the audio evidence is damning." She looked at Sterling Trust's legal team. "Your client has violated federal fair lending laws. I'm ordering a full federal investigation into Sterling Trust's practices." I'm awarding preliminary damages to the plaintiffs, and I'm referring Mr. Caldwell's conduct to the State Bar for review." She turned to Maya. "Miss Thompson, your courage in bringing this forward has exposed serious injustice. The court commends you." The gavel fell. The sound echoed like thunder. The verdict came 6 weeks later. Sterling Trust Bank was found liable for systemic discrimination. Damages: $3 million split among the 15 plaintiffs. Federal oversight: mandatory for 3 years. Policy reforms: comprehensive anti-discrimination training, independent auditing of loan decisions, and a dedicated civil rights compliance officer. Richard Caldwell was terminated. His banking license suspended. His career, built on gatekeeping and prejudice, was over. Maya stood outside the courthouse on a cold December afternoon. News cameras surrounded her, but she barely noticed. Patricia hugged her tightly. David shook her hand with tears in his eyes. Keisha introduced her daughters, who looked at Maya like she was a superhero. "You did this," Keisha whispered. "You gave us our voices back." Eleanor stood nearby, satisfaction written across her face. "Your father would be so proud." Maya's share of the settlement was $200,000, enough to launch Equi-Access properly, enough to hire a small team, enough to change her life. But the money wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the policy change. The federal oversight, the message sent to every bank that discrimination had consequences. Maya went home to her apartment. She'd been looking at new places. The settlement meant she could finally afford something bigger. But tonight she wanted to be here. Where this journey started, she sat at her desk. Her father's photograph watched from its frame. She picked it up, running her fingers over the glass. "We won, Dad," she whispered. "We actually won." Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "Thank you for not giving up. You made a difference." Lauren Michaels, the junior attorney who tried to help but couldn't. Maya smiled. Even those who couldn't testify had been watching. The ripples spread wider than she'd known. A week later, Equi-Access launched. The app she'd built to connect underserved communities with resources they needed. The first 1,000 downloads came within days. Users praised its simplicity and usefulness. Local news covered it as a success story. Maya hired 3 employees. One of them was Patricia's daughter, a recent computer science graduate. They worked from a small office downtown, building something that mattered. Maya kept her father's photograph on her new desk. The office had better lighting, more space, real potential. But the photograph remained the same. James Thompson, watching over his daughter as she carried forward his work in her own way. On her desk she also kept Richard Caldwell's business card, the one he'd given her that day in Sterling Trust Bank. She'd written something on the back. "They count on your exhaustion," a reminder. A warning. They promised to never forget. 6 months after the verdict, Maya visited her father's grave. Spring had arrived, bringing warmth and new growth. She carried flowers, yellow roses, his favorite. The cemetery was quiet. Birds sang in the trees overhead. Maya knelt beside the headstone and arranged the roses carefully. "I keep thinking about something you told me," she said to the stone. "You said the system counts on our exhaustion, on our belief that nothing will change." She paused. "You were right. That's exactly what they counted on." She thought about Richard Caldwell in that bank lobby, his certainty that she'd go away quietly, his confidence that power would protect him. He'd been right to be confident. Power usually did protect people like him until it didn't. "The truth is, Dad, I almost gave up. The lawsuit scared me. The isolation broke me down. I came so close to walking away," Maya's voice caught, "but then I remembered you never did. Even when you lost, even when it cost you everything." A breeze moved through the cemetery, rustling leaves like whispered encouragement. "I learned something fighting Sterling Trust," Maya continued. "Justice isn't guaranteed. It's not automatic. It requires people willing to stand in uncomfortable spaces and refuse to move." To document, to persist, to exhaust the system right back. She thought about the 15 plaintiffs who'd stood together, about Eleanor and her team, about Patricia finding her courage again, about every person who'd chosen risk over silence. Change happens when enough people decide their dignity matters more than their comfort, Maya said. When they stop accepting that this is just how things are. She stood, brushing grass from her knees. The sun broke through clouds, casting golden light across the graves. Her father's name was carved deep into granite, permanent and proud. Maya thought about equi-access, about the thousands of people now using it, about the small ways technology could democratize access to resources, about how one app, one lawsuit, one woman refusing to stay silent could shift something fundamental. She drove home slowly, watching the city pass by her window. Somewhere in this city, Richard Caldwell was probably bitter and angry. Somewhere Sterling Trust Bank was implementing reforms they'd resisted for years. Somewhere a young black woman was walking into a bank with a business plan, unaware that Maya's fight had changed what awaited her. That night, Maya opened her laptop. She'd been invited to speak at a conference for minority entrepreneurs. Her topic, When They Count on Your Silence. She began writing her speech, her father's letter beside her keyboard. The words came easily. She wrote about documentation, about pattern recognition, about the power of refusing to be invisible. She wrote about her father and his legacy, about Patricia's courage and Eleanor's expertise, about community as resistance. She ended with a quote she'd found in her father's case files, something he'd told clients over and over. They want you to believe your dignity is negotiable, that justice is a privilege they can grant or withhold, but dignity isn't theirs to take, and justice, real justice, belongs to those persistent enough to demand it. Maya saved the document. Outside her window, the city glowed with evening light. Somewhere out there, injustice was still happening. People were still being dismissed, humiliated, told they didn't belong. But somewhere out there, someone was also documenting. Someone was refusing to stay silent. Someone was learning that exhaustion was a weapon that could be turned around. Maya looked at her father's photograph one last time before closing her laptop. James Thompson smiled back, his legacy alive in every word she wrote, every fight she chose, every person who heard her story and found their own courage. The battle wasn't over. It never really was, but the line had moved. And that, as her father would say, was everything.